Why is an influential internet doctor so against the carnivore diet? Hi, I'm Dr. Eric Westman, and welcome to my channel where I review and debunk nutritional misinformation online. In this video, we're going to hear from Dr. Gundry. Dr. Stephen Gundry has a widespread internet presence and has lots of ideas about health, including diet. And he's not so favorable about the carnivore diet, or is he? Be sure to wait till the end till you get my final thoughts.
What happens if you only eat meat for 30 days? Now, you know I don't condone a carnivore diet, not long term at least. However, I have had patients do the carnivore diet who are profoundly sensitive to plant proteins. And when done right, it can be life-changing for some.
Yeah, I've had that experience too, where some of my patients have dropped the vegetables and done much better. And so what's the problem with it?
Let me give you a very recent example. A very dear friend of mine who's been a lifelong vegan, and get this, a gluten intolerant vegan. Talk about difficult. And I've traveled around the world with him and his partner, and I've watched how he struggled with health issues and, of course, struggled with finding things to eat. And it really came to a head this fall when we met up in Morocco to visit our olive oil farm. And he related that ever since he had been to Hong Kong a couple of months earlier, he had gotten some gastric disease of whatever. Massive diarrhea, never really subsided. Things kept getting worse. And the conversation came up, you know, have you ever considered just doing a carnivore diet for a month? That's all I asked. Because he didn't have an ethical reason to be a vegan. And he said, you know, I'm so desperate now, I'm so miserable, I will try anything. So we prepared him, and January 1st.
I have lots of people who come to me at wit's end. That you may be one of my patients who had tried everything and nothing's worked until you did a keto diet or a similar diet like that, or a carnivore diet. So I think there are a lot of ways to be healthy. But here he kind of bartered for 30 days of changing the diet. I don't think that's necessary. You'll know in a few days or a week if you're going to do better, in my experience. So if you want to reverse a condition, you might want to do it for a month. But the interesting thing is none of us, Dr. Gundry nor myself, were really taught about carnivore diets being acceptable as therapy. And while it may seem kind of weird, I've been studying keto diets for now over 25 years. And to me, a carnivore diet really is a subset of a keto diet. You get the same metabolism. And so let's see what happened to Dr. Gundry's friend. The wait is over. My carnivore course is now available for purchase. If you've tried low carb or keto, but still struggle with fatigue, inflammation, digestive issues, or autoimmune symptoms, this course could be the reset your body needs. Inside, I'll show you exactly why plant foods might be triggering your symptoms, how carnivore works as the ultimate elimination diet, and why this approach is so effective for healing and restoring your health. This isn't just a guide, it's a full program built to help you take control of your health, one meal at a time. Click the link below to get started today.
Of this year, he embarked on a carnivore diet. Now, this was great news to his partner who actually enjoyed animal protein. So he did the carnivore diet for 30 days. And let me tell you, it was life-changing for him. His GI issues went away. His strength and energy returned. He noticed that he actually was developing a six-pack for the first time in many years.
So what happens when you take away plant matter or get the carbs go super low. You go into a keto metabolism, which is very healing for many things, reverses type 2 diabetes, obesity, and also helps with gut issues. And if there's one thing, one signal that comes from my patient care, it's the healing of the gut. So the idea of just eating meat is really healthy for the gut.
And this is a devout athlete, works out every day with a personal trainer, and he noticed tons of positive changes. Now, should he continue on this course? And that's actually where we are with his progression right now. So using it as a tool to stop the assault of the gut wall by plant proteins like lectins and other plant defense proteins is one thing.
So let me unpack that. Using a carnivore diet, low carb, keto, to stop the assault of the lectins and vegetables on the gut wall, the intestinal wall. That's what he said. So this is the theory, that the leaky gut, the gut wall usually has a selective allowance of letting things get through it. And if it's damaged, it has a leaky gut phenomenon, then it lets things through that really shouldn't get through. It might even cause autoimmunity because proteins that come in are cross-reacting with your own body's protein. That's the theory. And I think there's a lot of evidence and it seems to explain what's going on. So the idea of cutting out the vegetables, the leaky gut heals, the reversal of GI issues like inflammatory bowel diseases like ulcerative colitis and Crohn's and even irritable bowel syndrome, heartburn, all of these things get better. So he's basically saying what I think the consensus view is, that it's okay and reasonable to use this as a therapy. But then what?
But whether the benefits long-term is another. Now, what do we know so far about the effects of a carnivore diet? Well, we know one thing is that the gut microbiome changes dramatically with a carnivore diet. The gut microbiome, in a way, is location, location, location. If you eat a primarily plant-based diet, your gut microbiome evolves to have bacteria that can take advantage of the different sugars that are in plants. On the other hand, if you eat only animal protein, your gut microbiome evolves so that only those gut bacteria that can eat amino acids, ferment amino acids, and other products predominate. And the gut microbiome that can eat simple sugars or complex sugars leaves. So you completely change what sort of bacteria you have in your gut.
Yeah, I think that's a great explanation. So the gut microbiome or bacteria react to the food that you're eating. So when you change the diet, the microbiome changes. This has always been, I don't know if it's illogical or just or the idea that let's study the microbiome of those who eat carbs and see the good bugs, and then put that into someone else who's got an illness or doesn't eat carbs and expect that it's going to help it, or that logic, it doesn't hold for me, although if they can prove that it works, great. But I wouldn't be drinking the probiotics that carb eaters are having if you're not eating carbs. Your microbiome changes. In a recent meeting, someone asked me, what about the microbiome? There's not much time. And I basically said, well, on a carnivore diet, the microbiome calms down. At a recent meeting, someone asked me, and time was limited, what the microbiome changes occur on a carnivore diet. What does a carnivore diet do to the microbiome? And I basically said it calms it down. It calms down the microbiome. And that's the clinical situation that we see. So these things change. Why not recommend a carnivore diet?
Now, one of the really important postbiotic gasotransmitters that I've written about in my last 2 books is hydrogen sulfide gas. Hydrogen sulfide gas is the rotten egg smell. And believe it or not, hydrogen sulfide is got a very interesting slippery slope that some hydrogen sulfide gas is really good for you, but too much hydrogen sulfide gas is very damaging to the colon wall. And we know that a carnivore, meat-based diet produces excessive amounts of hydrogen sulfide. You need some, but not too much. And from what we can tell so far, that too much is what you get from a carnivore diet. Now, is that going to cause problems for a month or so? No, I'm not saying it is. But long term, we need to assess whether or not that's something we want to look into in terms of heart health, vascular health, and even colon health.
Well, 25 years ago, that was kind of my position, is that, well, these ideas we have from carb eaters and the science among those who eat carbs show some differences now. And until we know further, we should be worried about it or cause alarm about it. Now we have clinics that actually can follow people without saying, I endorse this for everybody. I'm not convinced that the hydrogen sulfide issue is relevant in the context of those who don't eat carbs. So there are a lot of apples and oranges comparing studies among carb eaters. And I have to say, there are a lot of people who don't want you to eat red meat for other reasons. They're going to try to find mechanisms to explain this very weak association found in epidemiology studies to link cancer and red meat. And that's probably the most prejudicial, meaning without science, it's prejudged and blamed. One of the most prejudicial issues about a low-carb, keto, or carnivore diet, that red meat somehow causes cancer.
Are there long-term studies of a carnivore diet? And the answer is no.
So long-term studies are important, I think. And I would like to have studies done. There was a survey of those who self-describe themselves as eating a carnivore diet. The lab tests were done and a survey published in a peer-reviewed journal. But it would be great to have more formal testing and following lots of people. That said, you can measure a lot of these things that have to do with health. And if you've been reversing all of these problems, why wouldn't you just continue it? That's the situation here that I'm at, that it's okay to continue it, but with monitoring. Check in with somebody, have blood tests done, see how you feel. Don't just put your head in the sand and ignore what your body's telling you. But if there's something that has been therapeutic and healing, I think it's okay to continue it with monitoring.
First of all, there is no human society that's been studied that has great long-term health that follows a carnivore diet.
So looking back in history, or even today, he's saying there's no population that ate a uniformly carnivore diet, and if there was, they didn't live as long as other populations.
Now, the closest example that people use is the Maasai of Africa and the Inuits, the Eskimos of the Arctic. Unfortunately, neither of those societies have superb long-term health. And we can argue about why that may be, the horrible conditions that both of them live under. But the fact is, we don't have a living or ancient example of a long-term success carnivore diet. Now, there is overwhelming evidence from the blue zones, areas of the world where people live longer, healthier lives. The one thing that all blue zones share in common is that they have very little animal protein in their diet. Do they all have some? Yes, they absolutely do. Now, why might that be? Well, getting back to the carnivore diet. The carnivore diet deprives the gut microbiome of soluble fiber that gut bacteria need to eat to produce one of my favorite compounds, a short-chain fatty acid called butyrate, or butyric acid. Butyrate may be the most important signaling compound to protect against disease there is. Butyrate is the sole source of nourishment for the cells that line the colon. Now, I'm going to say that again. Your colon cells don't get their nourishment from what we eat from our bloodstream. They get it directly from butyrate produced by the microbiome. And they have to have soluble fiber to produce butyrate.
So I kind of feel like I'm listening to a story that may or may not be true. Well, so in the old paradigm, People eat carbs. The fiber is used to create butyrate, feeds the colon cells. That doesn't always have to be true. And you can actually feed the colon cells through the blood. In fact, that's probably more efficient. And it reminds me of when you do a low-fat diet, you starve your skin of fats and oils, and so a lot of people will put fat or something similar to fat on the skin because there's not enough getting through the blood. So this is using old paradigm, meaning carb eaters, and trying to find mechanisms to prove what you already think is true, and then extrapolating that. I'm not worried about the lack of fiber on a low carb diet, or keto or carnivore diet, because you can feed your colonic mucosa through different ways. The idea of human populations not being carnivore, therefore we shouldn't be carnivore, is kind of as nonsensical as if Orville and Wilbur Wright had decided, well, we looked around and there were no humans flying. And so we're never going to even try. And so in North Carolina, we go out to Kitty Hawk, where they did the first powered airplane flight. And North Carolina claims Orville and Wilbur Wright, where I know another state does as well. But anyway, the idea is that had they looked to the past, they would have said that, well, there are no studies that show humans can fly, so let's just give it up. No, I think we can do better, and let's not quibble about the past, and let's see how we go forward and maybe even do better.
We know that cancer cells, tumors, can use Nu5GC to hide from our own immune system, to cloak themselves. Now, we don't manufacture Nu5GC. We manufacture Nu5AC. The point is, where the cancer cells get Nu5GC to hide from our immune system? We had to have eaten it. So that may explain the association between a red meat diet and an increased risk of cancer. Now, I'm the first to admit that association does not equate with causation, but where there's smoke, there's often fire.
Yeah, so I just disagree that we should have started with the association does not prove causation, and talk about the weak association of red meat and cancer and the confounding, and not gone into immediately the possible link of why red meat might possibly cause, but it's not really caused. So I just don't think that that's important enough, strong enough. The level of evidence for this is not high enough to give concern, in my view.
Finally, the carnivore diet contains far too much animal protein. I'm sorry. Dr. Walter Longo, my friend at USC, the head of the Longevity Center, we both agree that we have far too much protein in our diets. Dr. Longo has an excellent equation that I use in my books to tell you the amount of protein that you really need in your diet. And quite frankly, 30 grams of protein, maximum 50 grams of protein is about all you need in your diet. Now, why is that seemingly so low? Well, most dietitians don't know that every day we recycle about 20 grams of protein. We make protein in our mucus. We make protein in the mucus lining of our gut. Our cells that line our gut are shed into our gut, and we digest the protein in these cells. We're very efficient. And then it actually ends up to be about 20 grams of protein that every day we just recycle.
So this, I have to say, is context dependent. I wish you'd give a little more nuance into that. The idea of Longevity Center, Dr. Longo, I've heard him speak, and that's a different situation. You're trying to live as long as you can. If you're on a GLP-1, you're trying to lose weight with a low carb diet or any other kind of medication, you want to support your muscle mass best that you can, and that would be different. You'd want to have more protein than this if you're in a therapeutic kind of situation, not just looking at this as a longevity treatment. I wish there would be a little more context there.
And over again, like I've written about in my book, studies have shown that when people are put on a high animal protein diet, it actually increases their risk of diabetes, something that none of us want.
Yeah, and so that doesn't make sense to me. So again, apples and oranges. If you eat red meat, just red meat, and you check your blood sugars will come down, and you won't have a blood sugar go up after a red meat, just red meat meal. Red meat doesn't cause diabetes. If red meat's consumed with all the other confounders, the carbs and the unhealthy lifestyle, whatever, more smoking and all that, sure. So apples and oranges, but just check your continuous glucose monitor before and after eating red meat. Let me know down below if it changed much. You hear red meat causes diabetes. What they're saying is in the context of eating carbs, it may cause insulin resistance with extra weight and all that, but red meat itself doesn't raise the blood glucose. We check the blood glucose when we talk about diabetes. It doesn't cause diabetes.
You can do a carnivore diet for 30 days, maybe 60 days. See if, you're having an effect, and then start to wean yourself off.
Start to wean yourself off. Something that's fixed your diabetes, that's a tough sell. Dr. Gundry, if your patient comes in and they've just reversed, you named the problem by telling what you told them, and then you're going to tell them to stop it. I don't think that's very rational. So I guess the summary, even if carnivore avoiding plants fixed you, you want to go back to eating plants and do it so that you reduce the plant defense mechanisms. I don't know, that doesn't seem logical to me anymore from a perspective of seeing people who haven't eaten many carbs thrive and do great. And I'd like to know your thoughts, your experiences down below. Hope you like this. If you do, be sure to like, subscribe, ring the notification bell, and look out for new content on Wednesdays and Fridays. If you enjoyed this video, consider joining our YouTube membership for early access and exclusive live Q&As with me. Just click the join button below or support us with a PayPal in the description.